Shabbat Shalom, everyone, from Covenant Calendar. This is a study of many, many details. This is about Yahusha's crucifixion year. Was it Common Era 28, as is commonly taught? What about Common Era 30? What about Common Era 31? What about 26 to 34, all those years? Many various groups have their determination of what year it is and the reasons why they determine it that way. We're going to be looking at some very basic calendar calculations. And so let's have an idea of what we're going to be looking at, and let's discern from the scriptures. This is a little bit of background information. With many different calendars, all laying claim to various years for the crucifixion, which ones can also claim full and complete alignment with the words of the scriptures? Please note the colored accents on there. I color it because I have no other way of emphasizing it effectively. I want these words to be understood. They also need to be able to produce within their studies, within their calendar. They need to be able to produce complete alignment with the words of the scriptures. No, not just the book of John, not just Matthew, Mark, and Luke, not just another book. They need to produce complete alignment from Genesis 1 right through Revelation 22. So when I say complete alignment, I'm expressing that clearly. They need complete alignment. Better yet, which calendars can reveal total compliance? Again, it's emphasized, total compliance. You cannot leave out one statute because it doesn't agree with you. Every statute must be agreed to and upheld and supported. Total compliance with timing fulfillment with each and every text of the week. Each and every text. It does not leave out texts. We can't leave out ones that do not agree with us. This is not a smorg of texts. Every one must be accounted for. Which of these calendars can accomplish a step-by-step pathway to show the lunar calendar's Passover of the Jews, and also the Torah-based dawn-to-dawn Passover of the covenant, and still produce meticulous alignment with the documentation in the Messianic Testament? And if these proclaimers of the faith can achieve a suitable common era year in alignment with the scriptural midst of the week crucifixion, as precisely detailed in the scriptures, can they find precise alignment with the essential 12-hour offset, which pinpoints the accurate common era year of the crucifixion? Yes, I colored those for a specific reason. That 12-hour offset is essential. It is written in the scriptures. If it's not produced by another calendar, then it is not in complete compliance with the scripture. Can they also define the two different Passovers of the two separate calendars, as specifically recorded by Matthew and John? Who told you there was two different Passovers? The scripture does. It's written in there. Have you seen two Passovers written in the Gospels and John? If you haven't seen that, I hope that you'll pay attention, because we're going to see two different Passovers from the scriptures. Which of the years from Common Era 26 to Common Era 34 cannot and will not apply? What makes the Common Era year of the crucifixion so incredibly and blindingly brilliant that it cannot be mistaken? Cannot be mistaken. That's pretty solid words. Some important information here. This is just the basics of how this study goes. Please note the word cycle. You will see it consistently in these studies. We choose to use cycle in place of day. Day has multiple meanings. either just the light season or the 24-hour cycle. By this inability to define one or the other or both, it can cause great confusion. So we choose in these studies to use the word cycle because it designates a full 24-hour period, from dawn to dawn, and that is according to all Scripture throughout all Scripture. Again, this is a teaching from Yah's covenant calendar. Why covenant? Why is the word covenant there? Basically, when Moshe brought the Hebrew nation out of Mitzrayim on an incredibly precise, documented calendar, and it was agreed to 3 times by the Hebrew nation of Mount Sinai, it was ratified in blood, and it was sealed with a covenant-sealed meal by the 75 elders on the mount. This calendar, this covenant calendar, is part of the Melchizedek covenant. That's why it is called the covenant calendar. The approximate dates we're going to look at are Common Era 26 to 34. There's a principle here we need to look at. Was Yahusha a lamb of the first year in Common Era 30? A lamb of the first year. Where do we get that? If we just look at the New Testament, we won't understand this. But Malachi says, remember ye the Torah. So where is this lamb of the first year recorded? Isn't that at the first Passover in Mitzrayim? Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. We see that in Exodus 12:5. This year-old male command from Yahuwah is a prerequisite. The Mashiach must fill with perfection. What about when Yahusha was on the tree and about to ready to give up his breath of life, and he said, it has been accomplished? What was it? Did he accomplish this prerequisite? Or did he skip over this statute and become a lamb of the third year? From what calendar do you receive your instruction? What year was the crucifixion? Matthew 26, verse 3. Then the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people came together at the court of the high priest, who is called Caiaphas, and plotted to seize Yahusha by trickery and kill him. Please note that puzzle piece. It's not there just because I like colors. This is a key to your calendar. It is a key to truth of the Scripture. What did the Pharisees and the scribes say? They wanted to kill Yahusha, but they declared, they covenanted with themselves that they would not kill Yahusha, not at the festival, lest there be an uproar among the people. That was their covenant with themselves. When Yahusha was still hanging on the tree, and I want you to have a look at this slide. This slide is not a random slide. I picked this slide because it reveals a dark hole. We have had a dark hole of knowledge on the crucifixion, and we have been unable to understand the proper year of this crucifixion. But I'm telling you today that what you're going to see today is going to remove this dark hole, and there is going to be light at the end of it. When Yahusha was still hanging on the tree, what date of the month was it, according to their lunar calendar? What about before sunset? What date was it then? What about after sunset? What date was it then? Have you ever asked that question? Who said there was a different date? What about that sunset? What date was it after when when Yosef requested the body of Yahusha after sunset? What Passover was that? Was the date still Lunar Abib 13 when Yahusha was hanging on the tree? And was it not at their festival? Matthew 26:5. When did their Lunar Abib 14 Passover begin? What about those two Passovers? Let's look at John 19:40. Then they took the body of Yahusha and bound it in linen wrappings with spices, as was the habit of the Yahudim for burial. Let me say that again. As was the habit of the Yahudim for burial. Those words reveal to you timing. That is calendar. That is very serious calendar words. Why and what was the habit of the Yahudim for burial? That body of Yahusha had to be cleansed, clean, purified, so that they could take him into so that if they were to take him into the tabernacle, it would not defile the tabernacle. That body had to be cleansed. That blood that was dried on his hair, that was dried in each and every pore in the heat of the sun, had to be removed. Do you think it was done before sunset? The body was not even requested until after the sunset. So let me start this again. Then they took the body of Yahusha and bound it in linen wrappings with the spices, as was the habit of the Yahudim for burial. And at the place where he was impaled, there was a garden, and in the garden a fresh tomb. A fresh tomb. Again, people, the linkage with those two words, fresh tomb, is absolutely astronomically incredible. That goes back to the red heifer. That goes back to the Tola worm who revealed the life and death of Yahusha. And in the garden, a fresh tomb in which no one had yet been laid. There, then, because of the preparation of the Yahudim, they laid Yahusha because the tomb was near. Hang on. Had not John already announced in John 19:14 that the preparation started at dawn, the 6th hour? That is the 6th hour from midnight in Roman reckoning. Why this particular announcement? What preparation is this? Can this link to Yahusha's words in John 7:19, where he was speaking to the Pharisees and the scribes, and he said to them, "Yet not one of you does the Torah"? What preparation of the Yahudim was this? What calendar was this? When did it start? Does it align with the scriptures? Does it fulfill prophecy? This is calendar language, pure and clear. What was the time frame of John's proclamation for the preparation of the Yahudim? The time frame. Wasn't it after the sunset in the night season of preparing Yahusha for burial? Once again, this slide was chosen specifically because of that tunnel with the black background where we do not have information. We are going to remove this slide with information. We are going to remove this hollow black hole and bring it to you clear. I'm going to read this question again. Wasn't it after the sunset in the night season of preparing Yahusha for burial? If you want to see those verses that speak on this, in that red box on the side are the verses you will need to look at to begin your study. What reason caused John to announce a second preparation at two separate and distant times? Distant, yes, 12 hours apart. And with the second preparation, yes, I said that, the second preparation being specified by reporter John, as I would like to call him, being specified as of the Yahudim, specific words. What is John revealing about their sunset event? Have you asked about that? Have you read this sentence and wondered, why does John say of the Yahudim? Or is it just idle words? Could this link to when they said not at the festival by the scribes and the Pharisees? The linkage is incredible here. Is it possible, please ask yourself this question, is it possible there were two calendar types of the preparation cycle occurring partially and simultaneously at Yahusha's crucifixion? Is that possible? Is that what's written in the scriptures? The calendars we're going to look at, the calendar years, are from Common Era 26 to 29 and 31 to 34. How come 30 is not in there? Well, we're going to have a second part number 2, and that's going to be on Common Era 30. So it's pretty interesting that part 1 is all these calendar years here, and we're going to reserve part number 2 specifically for Common Era 30. Why is that? Because Common Era 30 is going to reveal to you, step by step, 12 hours by 12 hours, the proceedings of the crucifixion. So I hope that everybody will be able to join me for that. The Yahudim stated clearly that they would not capture Yahusha at the festival or on their festival of the Passover. Shall we give them credit that according to their lunar sunset calendar, that they solidly held firm to their words? Did they lie, or did they hold up and establish their covenant with their actions? Let's give credit where it's due. If they did not capture Yahusha at the Passover festival, according to sunset theory and the lunar calendar, and they completed crucifying him in that ensuing lunar Abib 13 light season, terminology being very specific here, the lunar Abib 13 light season, is it possible that John is announcing their sunset event had changed the lunar Abib 13 to lunar Abib 14 at the sunset event? Now you have looked at our materials for the lunar system, the moon, the moon, and some people take that as we are doing away with the moon. Absolutely not. This lunar calendar, as documented in the scriptures, is incredibly, incredibly important. The precision that it brings to the table so that we can look at all the charts is absolutely astounding. It is with the lunar phases of the moon that we can determine exactly whose calendar was happening when. Yes, 2 calendars. 3 actually, if you count the civil Roman calendar. But there was 2 worship calendars. Which one was Yahusha on? Is it possible that Abib 14 on their lunar sunset Passover was offset by 12 hours from the dawn start of Yahuwah's covenant calendar? I'm going to read that one again because I want you to think on this really carefully. Is it possible that Abib 14 on their lunar sunset Passover was offset by 12 hours from the dawn start of Yahuwah's covenant calendar? What is that offset? We're going to see that clearly this afternoon. Which year, yes, which Shana year will establish the exceptional 12-hour offset? These are the years that we're going to be looking at, 26 to 34. Will we get our answers? 4 different scenarios within these years will be examined for all calendar years, searching for this 12-hour offset as written in the scriptures. Do you think the 12-hour offset is important? This series of studies is devoted to that 12-hour offset, to exposing it with clarity. This study is going to compare several different calendars for the placement of Abib 14 using number 1, the covenant calendar. Yes, the covenant from Mount Sinai. 2, lunar-based, and there's going to be a look at before and after the Tekufa and the equinox dates Why before and after? Because the lunar calendars reveal that they have chosen the sliver moon before and after the Tekufa. So we're going to look at both of them. We need to examine each option. We're going to look at the lunar and the Enoch-based calendars. Again, there's a before and after factor, and there is the Equilux dates. If you don't know what an Equilux is, it's equal day and equal night. And there is no unity on this earth if we are going by Equilux. We have a study specifically on the Equilux to show you that it is impossible to determine Abib 14 by Equilux and have unity with Yahuwah. Can't happen. We're going to look at that. These comparisons are always going to follow in the same order. There might be a couple extra routes we might travel to look at, but they will basically all be in the same order. The New Year day always begins the day after the Tekufa, after the Tekufa. That's by scriptural revelation, documentation. The New Year's Day is after the Tekufa, even though some teach the New Year's Day begins on the day of the Tekufa. These comparisons will also be noted to ensure every option has been considered to eliminate being off one day account. Yes, we are going to see if the New Year's Day is the day of the Tekufa. What will it do to this 12-hour offset? That's the question. What will it do? Let's look at Deuteronomy 31:18. But I will surely hide my face in that day because of all the evil which they shall commit, in that they are turned unto other gods. Other gods. If we are not worshiping Yahuwah in the system agreed to in the covenant, who are we worshiping? Where does our worship go to? If we are given allegiance to anything else other than Yahusha of the covenant, who receives our worship? Is calendar important? We have been asked that so many times. What can you find in calendar that you spend so much time on? Well, it's been many, many years, and I think we barely scratched the surface. Is this important? Absolutely. We do not want to worship other gods. Verse 19, now therefore, write ye this song for you, and teach it the children of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be my witness against the children of Israel. For I will bring them into the land, which I swear unto their fathers, that floweth with milk and honey. And they shall eat and fill themselves and wax fat. Then what will they do? Yahuwah knew what was going to happen. Then shall they turn unto other gods. And what will happen? And serve them, and contemn me, and break my covenant. Do you see some strange spelling? Yes, you do. This is from the Geneva 1587. I appreciate that edition. It has some incredibly important comments in the column. Very, very interesting to read. What about this, where it says they shall turn to other gods? How are they going to turn to other gods? Who will they worship? What schedule will they use for the appointed times? If they are on another schedule, Isaiah 13, verse 14, where Hasatan says that he is going to rule the heavens, he is going to rule the Moedim, he is going to be above the mountain of the Moedim and above the altar, or be above the throne of Yahuwah. Which God will be worshipped when they turn away from Yahuwah's covenant? And if they give allegiance to another God, isn't that serving them? And serve them. You don't have to get down on your hands and knees and bow down to a different system to serve them. Where do you give your allegiance today? We knew the Hebrew nation gave various calendar allegiances. Do you think it's any different today? What about that verse that says nothing new under the sun? We think that we're so smart. What are we doing today? Are we falling into the same traps? I pray that Yahuwah will open up our eyes and bring us out of those traps. Drop the traditions that we, our fathers, have inherited. Surely your fathers have inherited lies. Are we paying attention to that verse, or is it going in one ear and out the other? What about us today? From whom do we get our information, and from who accepts it? There is an ongoing question among many calendar teachers. What year was it when Yahusha died? How come that question is here? How come we hear that? Have they not studied solidly? Have they not applied the verses onto charts? If not, why not? Combining the scriptural foundation of covenant calendar with the astronomical charts and historical calendar records has provided an exceptional accurate reckoning to pinpoint the exact year of the crucifixion. When I say exceptional accurate reckoning, that is not an exaggeration. You're going to see the finalization of that this afternoon. The very fact that the covenant calendar dating of Abib 14 and the lunar system of dating Abib 14 was offset by 12 hours from each other is a monumental pillar in this determination. And I will claim that is like oxygen. It's that important. That 12-hour offset is extremely accurate. So the first step we're going to look at here is determining and understanding an extremely important principle. In two more slides, note the listed times of the Tekufa for Common Era 26. They are near midnight. What's midnight do? Today we're in Roman reckoning, same as John was declaring back in his documentation. Midnight, according to the civil calendar, changes the date of your calendar. What does Yahuwah have to say about that? What effect will this factor have on your calendar, on your Tekufa calculations, on your set apart appointments? When you meet with Yahuwah, when we are required to present ourselves before Yahuwah on his Moedim, does the midnight come into play? What will we do with it? The Tekufa dates are recorded on Roman reckoning in these next bit of information. The midnight changes the date on man's calendars. Yahuwah's date exchange occurs at the first light of dawn. Let's look at the profound effect this difference has. The outcome may be insignificant in Common Era 26. However, further in this study, it is monumental and nothing short of it. Common Era 26, chart number 1. You see all this documentation here? This is the things that we study. This is the Tekufa in the spring. And they have here recorded that the Tekufa was on the 22nd of March. Note this time, 2300 hours and 23 minutes. That is close to midnight. The Tekufa timing is registered with Greenwich Mean Time, or Coordinated Universal Time. This means the time frame must be adjusted to Yisrael, or Jerusalem time. To do this adjustment, 2 hours must be added. 2 hours must be added. If we go up here, what happens when you add 2 hours to 2300 hours and 23 minutes? Does it go past midnight? And if it does, do you accept a date change because man declared it? Or are we going to pay attention to Yahuwah's time change at dawn? This is the factor we need to look at. This 2-hour time change is huge. Therefore, the time of the Tekufa was 1:23 a.m. This means Rome's midnight marker has passed by, and consequently the Gregorian date in Jerusalem time changes, according to them, changes to March 23. What about Yahuwah? What does he say on that? Did Yahuwah's covenant calendar date change with the midnight? Here's another chart we're going to be looking at. Observation notes are for chart number 2 of year 26. Please read this. I've got this underlined. The dates have been adjusted 2 hours for us. That's pretty nice. Adjusted 2 hours. Just one step we don't have to do. Let's take it and run with it. You see over here, first evening of the visible crescent. That's handy. Sometimes. The date of the 1st of Nisan. That's handy. Sometimes. The date of the 14th of Nisan. Pay attention to this date. Do we just accept what they say? Over here, the vernal equinox as declared on March 22. Please note this asterisk. This asterisk denotes midnight. Has this time change been loosely rounded off? Are we just going to accept it and run with it? Again, the chart for Common Era 26 continued. The U.S. Naval Authority declares this has already been adjusted for Jerusalem time, yet there is a 1.5 hour difference from chart number 1. Which chart will provide dependable service? Which chart are you going to agree with? Chart number 3. This is another one. Look at this one. 4:25 a.m. local mean time. That's LMT. 4:25 a.m. That's a lot of time change. How come the difference? Which one are we going to go with? Look at this, March 23. Yet we saw back there the Tekufa or the equinox was on March 22. How come March 23 here? Does it have to do with the midnight reckoning, Roman reckoning? Are we going to accept it, or are we going to say, Yahuwah, what is your choice? What do you have in mind for us? The Tekufa timing is registered with LMT, and it's already been adjusted to Jerusalem. The Roman midnight marker has been passed, and consequently, the Gregorian date in Jerusalem time is recorded as March 23. It's much later than the last 2 charts. Does Yahuwah's covenant calendar agree with changing the date at midnight? When Moshe was leading the Hebrew nation through the Red Sea, and he had claimed that their salvation came today, did it stop at midnight? Was the Red Sea, did the Red Sea wash out the Mitzrites at midnight? No. Midnight does not change the day, not according to Yahuwah. That salvation today came at dawn. And incidentally, that is the Old Testament's first recorded witness for the 7th-day Sabbath starting at dawn. Please note that. If you want a Torah witness for the 7th-day Sabbath starting at dawn, read the crossing of the Red Sea account. What about this Roman reckoning as recorded in the scriptures? Does it agree with Matthew 27:19? What about John 19:14 and 20 verse 1? Roman reckoning. Again, importance of knowing that. The importance is like knowing or having oxygen in your veins. Back to Genesis 1, dawn to dawn. The Tekufa date, here we are, March 30. In 1000 BC is what the recording is. 26 AD is March 23. What they say over here, March 22 is what I should say. Over here, March 22. What about all these charts down here? March 23, different timing. Well, with Yahusha, with dawn to dawn, it's still March 22 because the time does not change the day until dawn. So our Tekufa is still March 22, and that's what we're going to go with, dawn to dawn. No, the midnight mark has no bearing on Yahuwah's time clock. And the question then is, will there be a significant factor affecting the year of Common Era 34? And what about Common Era 30? Common Era 30 will be seen in part 2 this afternoon. Be sure to be there. If you want to see a 12-hour offset step by step implemented on the crucifixion, please join us. I'm quite sure you will enjoy it. Step number 2, implementing Yahuwah's dawn to dawn midnight marker, the Passover principle, and searching for the 4th cycle crucifixion combined with the scriptural 12-hour offset and the festival of the Jews. A 4th cycle crucifixion, yes, that is what prophecy said. That is also what the revelation of the Gospels and John reveal. It was a 4th cycle crucifixion. What about those spices that the ladies purchased on the preparation before the 7th-day Sabbath? That's another thing that needs to be understood for a 4th cycle crucifixion. And this 12-hour offset with the festival of the Jews, this is going to determine with accuracy what year Yahusha died on. And it's a look between the covenant calendar and the lunar calendar, both of them written with extreme clarity in the scriptures. Extreme clarity? Yes. If you have your calendar eyes open, it jumps off the pages at you. First to be considered is the lunar Abib 14 dating as placed on the Gregorian calendar. Second to be considered is to look for the scriptural 12-hour offset as a result of their sunset day start. I hope I'm emphasizing this 12-hour offset enough. Third to consider is to seek for the lunar Abib 14 date to be one Gregorian cycle following the covenant calendar Abib 14 Passover on the 4th cycle. This lunar Abib 14 cannot be 12 hours or cannot be more than 12 hours out. Otherwise, you have the wrong calendar, or you have the wrong year, or you have the wrong dating. This 12 hours must be side by side. Yahusha said, when he said, it has been accomplished, he died, he was crucified on Abib 14 on the covenant calendar. What about the lunar calendar? It was there, Abib 14 at sunset, was it not? Remember, the Gregorian date, according to the Talmud, started with the previous sunset. We're going to see this, especially in part 2. According to historic documentation by Julian Morgenstern, declaring that the Jews used the crescent moon before the Tekufa, we will look for their lunar-based Passover pattern. Please note that this rule was not written in stone, but fluctuated according to their desired yearly calendar results. Fluctuated. Didn't we see that in John 7, where Yahusha said to his brothers, my time is not yet, but your time is always ready. That word ready in the Greek means adjustable. Yahusha, because of who he was, he knew what happened previously. That's why he could say, your calendar is always ready. It is fluctuating. It is designed how you want it. That documentation is in history. It's a fact. Again, what is the baseline purpose of this exercise? To align the scripture of John 19:42 and Matthew 26:5, where John records that on the very cycle of Abib 14 covenant calendar, after the sun had set, when Yahusha was about to be buried, it was also the preparation of the Yahudim. They laid Yahusha because the tomb was near. Preparation of the Yahudim, we know, is a preparation of Yahuwah. What about this preparation of the Jews? What calendar was that? And does it relate to when Yahusha said to the Pharisees, not one of you does the Torah? Linkage. We need to remember this linkage. The 12-hour offset timing factor must be realized in determining the correct year of the crucifixion. What is UT? According to the timeanddate.com, it is a time standard reflecting the mean solar time at the prime meridian in Greenwich in the UK. UT1 is a successor of the original version of Greenwich Mean Time. Before UTC was introduced as the world time standard in 1972, GMT, or Greenwich Mean Time, was a solar time standard that also acted as a reference point to determine local times worldwide. Today, GMT is a common time zone, deriving its local time from UTC. I want you to look on the side over here at this chart. On this chart, this is a list of all the Tekufa dates, the Tekufa times. Notice here, 23, 22, 23, 22, 23, 22, as you go down here. Why the different days? Why isn't it one day? Well, there's a variation in the Gregorian calendar. That's why the day change in the dates. It's the Gregorian change, not Yahuwah's change. He does not change. That Tekufa, or the equinox, comes at a precise moment every year without fail. This is the main chart we're going to use in this research. There's a lot of documentation. You can take these charts back a long ways. You can bring them forward. You can study to your hearts out until the cows come home with these charts. They're great. They provide us with a lot of material. First up, Common Era 26. Let's begin. This is the interesting part. Does Yahuwah's dawn-to-dawn covenant affect the Tekufa timing? Note when you see CC, that is covenant calendar, looking for Yahusha's crucifixion on a fourth cycle. Again, 26 of the Common Era. This is the old system, AD. I'll be using Common Era instead of this AD. Note the date, March 22, 2300 hours, as we saw before. Add the 2 hours. It changes to March 23, 1:23 a.m. Yisrael time. Adjusted to Yisrael time. March 23, however, Yahuwah does not recognize Roman midnight changeover. Tekufa remains on March 22. Where is our Tekufa? When you see it here, March 22, this blue box. When you see this Tekufa box here, I want you to think, look at the green lines. These green lines are going to count out 14 days from the day after the Tekufa, 14 days over to here, culminating on the 5th. Those green lines are going to show you 14 days to the Abib 14 covenant calendar Passover. In this year, the 14th was on a 6th cycle. You see this Friday here in common terms, in our what we can recognize. A 6th cycle. This is a preparation. So this, as we go through this study, all these charts are going to have this. So I ask you to please remember this. Please remember these green lines are going to count out 14 days. Again, Passover on a 6th cycle according to covenant calendar. Yahusha's dawn to dawn retains March 22. Again, Passover on a preparation, a 6th cycle in Common Era 26. Now, as I told you earlier, is the cycle of the Tekufa sign the first cycle of the year? Is it the New Year day? If March 22 Tekufa was the New Year day, and that would mean we start the count right here, not on 23, we would count back one day. then the covenant calendar of Abib 14 would have been on April 4th, where you see this red circle. It would have been on April 4th, a fifth cycle. Note, Common Era 26 cannot support Scripture's fourth cycle, crucifixion, nor can it provide us with a 12-hour offset. The New Year's Day was not on the Tekufa. So now we're going to be looking at the lunar view of Common Era 26. And I want you to note when you see these on these charts, you'll see the dark spot. This is the conjunction, and this is the rest of the moon phases. This conjunction is very interesting. That's what we're going to be looking at. So let's continue here with Common Era 26. There is our Tekufa again. It's on the recorded date right here. That's the date that Yahusha agrees with because it was before the midnight marker. So that's what Yahusha says. Here is the conjunction. You see down here, it tells us the conjunction, the dark moon, when we can't see it, is on the 8th. So we mark that in the box up here. We're going to see this on all the charts. So I'm hoping you can become familiar with this so you understand what we're doing here. So if the conjunction is here, we're going to bring in the sliver moon. This is when you spot the sliver moon. I myself chased the sliver moon for many years. Most of those years I never saw it because it was evasive. I'll leave it at that. Since this was the spotting of the sliver moon, this would be new moonth day. Note the spelling, new moonth day. This is where our word month came from. So I use it here, new moonth day, just a little bit more accurate for us. Count out 14 days. From here down to here, we see 14 days. The lunar-based Passover of Common Era 26 would have been the first cycle of the week. Note this, first cycle. Well, you can't see it, but you can see in line here, it's a Sunday in common terms. That Sunday would be up here, except for the boxes in the way. So it's a first cycle Passover. First cycle of the week. Common Era 26, there is no possibility of finding a compatible 12-hour offset with the covenant calendar. Can we throw out the verses of John 19:42 and Matthew 26:5 because it does not agree? If we look over here, this is where covenant calendar Passover was, way over here. There's a lot more than 12 hours from here to here. What does that do with this lunar view of Common Era 26? Well, it doesn't work out. From new moonth day, there are 26 cycles to the Abib 14, the sixth cycle of covenant calendar. So this is going to be removed because it does not work with the scripture. But let's look at the next sliver moon, because some people have said, oh, well, then we should get the sliver moon after the Tekufa, because yes, indeed, they did do that, and we see that documented also. So let's look at it. The next sliver moon, that would be that would be April 8. That would be after covenant calendar Passover, making the lunar Passover calculation much later. So we're not even going to go into that any farther because it's kind of a moot point. Way, way too late. It's time now to consider if there are any possibilities around the Equilux, timing for the moon and non-moon calendars. An example, the lunar and equinox. Some well-known lunar calendar ministries declare an Equilux and sliver reckoning is to be used for a year start rather than the equinox or the Tekufa of these scriptures. Do note that if the sliver moon appears on the date of the Equilux, that's not equinox, that is Equilux, that the moon is considered a valid sliver moon. And they also say on the next day is the new lux day. This is their proclamation. So we're going to look at it because we do know ministries that declare this. So let's check and see if they are right. We're going to be looking at these charts. Some Enoch calendar followers use the day after the Equilux as the first cycle of the year. Evidence example is going to be seen on the next slide. And here is a print screen from some of their promotional material. They declare, well, let's read this. Enoch is acclaimed to follow the Equilux, and note the equal light and equal night statement. Could this be a reason why we hear of the equinox being a week earlier? Because they decide it's equal light and equal night instead of the true equinox? Could this be? Well, they declare equal light and equal night from sunrise to sunset. What happened to the twilights? Why sunrise to sunset? Is the twilights not considered part of the light season, as Yahuwah said, as Yahuwah covenanted? Why do they leave out or set aside his covenant? One problem that belies here is the removal of the twilight seasons from the light season as covenanted by Yahuwah in Genesis 1. You'll read about that in Jeremiah 33:20. So here is their proclamation. They claim the Tekufa, only they say the Tekufa, or they understand the Tekufa as the Equilux, because they say day of equal night and equal day in Jerusalem. This is their proclamation. This is not a Tekufa. This is Equilux, and it does not provide unity in Yahuwah's people. So let's look at it. This is another option that we have to examine because it's out there. Let's view an Enoch calendar promo slide. Not all Enoch followers go by the Equilux, but some do. Please note the direct link to paganism. In 167 BCE, King Antiochus returned to Jerusalem after his second campaign in Egypt, and he immediately banned the Hebrew religion and the Enoch calendar. I do not have information to solidify or to clarify that statement. I don't know. I haven't seen the proof that he banned the Enoch calendar. One of the reasons is because I do not believe the Enoch calendar even existed at any time as proclaimed, but I'll leave that for another day. Continuing on, and prohibited all religious practices. Yes, that he did. He dedicated the temple in Jerusalem to who? To Zeus. Note the terminology. Lord, that's Baal, Lord of heaven, Lord of Baal. Do we still use that word today? And if we do, maybe we should think about it. Continuing on, and ordered the Hebrew people to worship Zeus and to participate in the festival honoring Dionysius, who was Zeus's son, who was called Bacchus by the Romans. And Dionysius Bacchus was known as the dying and rising god, as he was twice born. This festival, called Bacchanalia, was held on March 16th and March 17th to what? To pollute the Hebrew spring equinox day and the New Year's Day. My people, when we hear that the equinox is, as they falsely claimed equinox, is on the 16th or the 17th of March, which god is being worshipped? Remember, Isaiah Hasatan said that he was going to rule the Moedim. How does he accomplish that? Does he give us different dates, different calendars, different systems, different research books to receive our information from? We need to be careful. Continuing on here. When King Antiochus began sacrificing swine and making abominable offerings in the temple, this began the Maccabean revolt. And we can read about that in the chapter 1 and 2 of the Maccabees, 4, 5, or 4, 6, and 7. Up here, direct link to paganism. What do we do with this Equilux Bacchanalia observation? Where is our allegiance? We're going to be looking at the Equilux chart slide soon. Yahuwah's Tekufa, March 19 to 22 Gregorian. And I've explained earlier that those date differences is because of the variable Gregorian date. Let's look at James 1:17, and I'll read this carefully. Every good giving and every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness. Say that again. With whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. You'll remember that Yaakov, we know that as James in English, Yaakov doubted Yahusha with his brothers. They were on the lunar-based calendar of the Jews, and he wanted Yahusha to go up to the festival to show them who he was. Yaakov wanted to be part of his fame if Yahusha was who he was. So they encouraged him, go up to this festival. They were not on the covenant calendar. Yet after Yahusha was crucified and resurrected and gone up to the Shemayim, this is Yaakov's writing. He recognized the covenant calendar, for he writes here, neither shadow of turning. What do we look for on the Tekufa? When we have a simple sundial, we look for the shadow because that is going to tell us when the Tekufa is. That word turning is trope in Greek, and it is referencing the celestial turning of the identities in the heavens. It is referencing the Tekufa. So here, James has revealed that he changed his belief structure after Yahusha died. He changed it and he recognized that the covenant calendar of Yahuwah is still there, still viable today, and he wrote about it. There is no variableness like he had seen in the lunar calendar, and he wrote, a shadow of turning. This is the covenant calendar witness by Yahusha's own brother. Here is a big problem. On March 16 to 17, when we look at the Equilux, remember, the Equilux does not consider the shadow. There will still be a curved shadow line on the Equilux. But yet they're not looking for a shadow. They're looking for equal night and equal day. So there's a big problem here. March 16 and 17 is most certainly not the Tekufa. March 16 and 17 is the time of the Equilux, the Bacchanalia observance from light to night. There is a massive difference, and it is huge. Whom do you give your allegiance to? Again, an Equilux shadow, the Father of lights, with whom there is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. Are these puzzle pieces? Yes, this is calendar speak, loud and clear. Where is the shadow to be measured in the Equilux equation? It is non-existent. The Enoch info is greatly mistaken on the Tekufa event. In proceeding, we will be documenting the Equilux date in Jerusalem as starting at sunset of March 16 and ending at sunset on the 17th of March. All following Equilux slides will be formatted in this respect. A qualification problem with the Equilux. One insurmountable problem with the Equilux is that the two Ereb twilight mixings, that is dawn and evening mixtures, they are not considered part of the light season as written and covenanted in Genesis 1. Man rejects Yahuwah's decision to place the Ereb evening and the Boker twilights as light. Instead, man relegates both twilights to the night season. That is called playing God and setting aside Yahuwah's covenant. This glaring factor alone eliminates the Equilux from being a scriptural doctrine. Would you like to read that sentence carefully? However, let's prove the Equilux waters anyhow. Why? Because it's out there. That's what we hear. Let's look at it. This is, again, Common Era 26, and we're going to look at the Equilux. Over here again, as we've seen before, this is the Tekufa on the 22nd. See, it's recorded here. This is the light season of the Equilux. This is when the day of the Equilux finished off on the 17th. The next day is the New Lux month. I'm going to use that terminology. New Lux month day. Let's count out the days. 14 days. Where does it lead us? To the 31st. Equilux, Abib 14, is on a first cycle of the week. Again, Passover on a wrong cycle for the scripture alignment. And it is far too early to secure scripture's 12-hour offset with either the covenant calendar or the lunar calendar of the Jews. This is a double Equilux failure. Again, from here over to here, covenant calendar is way too far for a 12-hour offset. Next up, Common Era 27, same exercise. And on the second slide, we're going to be looking for the Lunar Passover. But first, we're going to have a little information thing here. This chart is adjustable when you bring it up on your computer, and you can slide it back and forth to tell when your time frames are. This will tell you when your astronomical twilight at Boker for March 23. So we can become very precise of when the dawn twilight begins. Note over here, it's on March 23. That's Roman reckoning again. But this is the precision time when the dawn starts. Very good chart to have. Important information for the next slide. Look in the red box to note the timing of dawn on March 23. And again, as I said, it slides so you can adjust it when it's up on your computer. It's the exact time of the astronomical twilight in Jerusalem. Precision timing of dawn according to Yahuwah. So this is one of the things that we use to determine these charts. Common Era 27, looking for Yahusha's crucifixion on a fourth cycle. Will the lunar calendar of 27 provide this? Attention here, the Tekufa is recorded past the point of dawn. Note this, 7:04 a.m., past the point of dawn. According to the Torah and the Gregorian, the Tekufa remains on March 23. Covenant calendar Passover was on a first cycle of the week, as in Genesis 1, dawn to dawn. Again, note this, there's your Tekufa, the blue box. Remember what you do with these green lines? Count out 14 days. This brings us to Abib 14 on the 14th, and it is on a first cycle on a Sunday in English terms, a first cycle of the week. Well, that does not provide us with a midst of the week crucifixion on covenant calendar for the year 27. That eliminates it. How about the Tekufa sign as the New Year day? Let's look at this. Here is the Tekufa sign, March 23 in the Gregorian. There's the Tekufa sign. Well, we're going to count out. If March 23 is Tekufa and it was the New Year day, as some proclaim, then covenant calendar Abib 14 would have been on the 5th, right here, a 7th cycle. In Common Era 27, there is no fourth cycle Passover, nor any chance of a 12-hour offset to reflect the scriptural account. Now, I want you to note, as we go through, we'll be looking at this. If the New Year's Day is the day of the Tekufa, I want you to note this, because I want you to mark down on a piece of paper how many times it works. And let me suggest to you that when we get to the end of part 2, you're going to see that not once is the New Year's Day on the Tekufa. Not once, but you need to see this with your eyes so that you can document it and you can understand clearly that when it says by 3 witnesses that we know of thus far in the scripture that New Year's Day is after the Tekufa, then you will understand it and believe it. So continuing on here, the lunar view again in Common Era 27. I should say lunar view number 1 is not again. Again down here, Tekufa, that's the 23rd. Now here's our conjunction, again, the 26th, we see the black dot, that's the dark moon when you don't see it. That's our conjunction. We're going to bring in the sliver moon. Interesting, this chart documents the sliver moon here. It's on the 28th, so we'll use this chart for this, because it works out with the second evening when you do usually see the sliver moon. Let's continue our count. We're going to bring this date of up to here on the 28th, the sliver moon, and we're going to say that the next day is the new moon's day, and we're going to count out from the 29th, 14 days, which brings us to the 11th of April. Do you see variableness here? Didn't Yaakov say, with whom there is no variableness? How come we are seeing a variety of dates? Is that a flag? From new moon's day, there are 14 cycles to the 11th, the 6th cycle. Covenant calendar Passover is over here. Common Era 27, the lunar Passover would have been, in Gregorian terms, on the 11th of April, a 6th cycle of the week. Again, no possibility of finding a compatible 12-hour offset with the covenant calendar. This is a lunar view. What about Enoch's Jerusalem Equilux view? Remember, we just spoken about the Equilux. Let's look at it again. The Equilux, the Bacchanalia observation, the pagan Bacchanalia observation is on the 17th. Again, New Lux month day, 14 days to the 31st. Enoch Equilux Abib 14 is on a 2nd cycle of the week. Yeah, it's on a Monday in English terms. Problems are, it's not a 4th cycle. And it is far too early to secure Scripture's 12-hour offset with either the covenant calendar or the lunar calendar of the Jews. What do we have? A double Equilux failure. Of course, we can always ignore some of the scriptures where it talks about the 12-hour offset. We can set them aside if it doesn't agree with us. We do have that option. I don't choose it. Neither does covenant calendar. So now here comes Common Era 28. This is an incredible year because this is when most feast-keeping groups declare that Passover, when Yahusha died, was on Common Era 28. This is a popular one, very, very popular. So we're going to have a bit of a detour here. In the last few years, there has been an explosion of calendars that all claim to be the correct festal year or festal calendar of Yahuwah. Most of these calendars over the last 60 to 70 plus years use the moon that follows the equinox. However, with this explosion of calendars, many are now saying the equinox is pagan, right from the belly of Rome. And yes, we have heard this very, very clearly. They say, therefore, a new calculation. Oh, what about the variableness? How can we have a new calculation? Is that a variable factor? Something to think about when you read what these people declare. starting again. Therefore, a new calculation has been devised for their festal calendars to use the moon on or following the March 17 Equilux. Have you heard of this before? It's out there and close to us. This tends to create an interesting problem at the present time for ministries that claim April 28th in Common Era 28 is the year of the crucifixion. This April 28th calculation is based on the moon following the equinox, even though their current calculation for the festal calendar uses the moon following the equilux, usually about March 17. This is a huge conflict, yet they profess this. Variation. Let us oblige ourselves to check out what in the world is going on with the idea that the year end can be around either the equinox or the equilux. Did Yahuwah give us that option? Let it be known the year start can follow only one or the other, but never both. And do remember, Yahuwah does not change. Those are his words. So let's start with Common Era 28. This is an interesting year. I like this one. We're looking for Yahusha's crucifixion on a fourth cycle. Again, we see the blue box, Tekufa, the green lines, that's the 14-day count, brings us to, Monday, or a second cycle. This is 28, Common Era 28. Yet this is the year that so many feast groups declare is the Passover of Yahusha when he died. Yet here we see in Common Era 28, according to the covenant calendar, that Passover was on the 14th in that year, or was on April the 5th that year, on a second cycle of the week. That eliminates this year of 28 from being the year that Yahusha died. Eliminates it. Note, Common Era 28, covenant calendar, Abib 14, on a second cycle of the week. Why is it we hear this year is so popular for the belief that this is the year that Yahusha died? There is no fourth cycle crucifixion here. Didn't happen. Sorry. How about the Tekufa sign as the New Year day? Remember, we're going to be looking at this again. Here we see our Tekufa box, the green lines, same Passover date here. What about the New Year day? Here we see the vernal equinox again, March 22. Note, if the March 22 Tekufa was the New Year day, then look over here where this oval is, then covenant calendar Abib 14 would have been on April 4th, a first cycle. First cycle. That means Common Era 28, again, no possibility of a midst of the week crucifixion and no possibility of a fourth cycle 12-hour offset with the Yahudim. Again, did the day of the Tekufa being a New Year's day, did it fulfill prophecy? Certainly not in this year. Let's look at more here. We're going to be looking at the lunar sliver before the Tekufa, because that is what is documented as how they observed. Okay, again, covenant calendar, Tekufa, March 22. Here's your conjunction. Again, the conjunction is told us right here, so we put that up here, conjunction. Bring in the sliver moon 2 evenings later, the sliver moon. Here we have new moonth day. From new moonth day, we count 14 days. Here we are. Yes, we see a fourth cycle Passover on this calendar. That's pretty interesting. Very interesting. From the new moonth day, there are 14 cycles to the 31st, a lunar fourth cycle Passover. Now, this lunar Passover must have a 12-hour offset documented with another calendar. And that other calendar must be covenant calendar. What about the days in between to over here? Can you get a 12-hour offset between covenant calendar and the lunar calendar of 28? Is there 12-hour difference? What does this do to the verses in the scripture that declare a 12-hour offset? Do we rip those pieces of scripture out of our Bibles because we cannot find alignment? And because we're taught that the lunar calendar is right? Do we ignore those scriptures? Or do we realize that there is a problem with calendar year 28? There's a lunar problem. Remember Yahusha said to the scribes, yet not one of you does the Torah? Is that picture becoming pretty clear here? This exposes another complete lunar failure with no alignment of a 12-hour offset between the two calendars, as documented in Matthew 26:5, and also as written even clearer in John 19:14. Shall we choose to keep those pieces of scripture? I think so. Please notice the late dating on the chart below that is provided for our research purposes concerning Common Era 28. Because of this late factor, we will be viewing this late dating, and also we will look closely at the Equilux factor immediately afterwards. Note the lateness of the chart information, April 13. That is how long after the Tekufa? A very long ways. This is when we are told to observe our new moon. See, first evening of visible crescent over here. Variableness in its purest form. So let's look at this. The lunar sliver view after the Tekufa, and we're going to look at the late factor. I should have pointed out first, remember, here is the covenant calendar, Abib 14, way up here. Yet, some ministries claim the lunar moon right here, the lunar system, and they observe the crescent moon this late. This is why we see Passover sometimes right near the end of April, a long ways away. But let's look at it. Here's the conjunction. Here's the sliver moon. This sliver moon follows the conjunction, not as the normal 2 days later. This is from a chart that tells us that this is when the sliver moon is discovered, right after the conjunction. But let's go with it. That's what the chart says. Count out from new moon's day, 14 days to the 28th. From new moon's day, there are 14 cycles to the 28th, the lunar fourth cycle Passover. A fourth cycle Passover? Yes, we have a fourth cycle Passover. Yay! But the problem is, what about your 12-hour offset? What about that? How can we justify this variableness, and how without the 12-hour offset? The scriptures declare a 12-hour offset on the year of the Passover. Will we let that slide by? Or are we going to find the year of the crucifixion? Common Era 28 is a very popular year for the crucifixion with a very late date. What about that 12-hour offset? Non-existent in this year. What does this do for Common Era 28 in the lunar system? Next up, Common Era 28, we're going to be looking for Abib 14 according to the Equilux. Here we are, Equilux. Enoch's Jerusalem Equilux view. Again, over here, Bacchanalia observation of Equilux. New Lux month day on the 18th. An Equilux-based Abib 14 fourth cycle. Yay, another fourth cycle Passover. This is identical to the sliver moon before the Tekufa reckoning in this year. Look at that. A fourth cycle Equilux Passover. So how do you observe a pagan tradition and claim a fourth cycle Passover? How does that work? Equilux Abib 14 is on a fourth cycle of the week. The problem is it is far too early to secure Scripture's 12-hour offset with the covenant calendar. And what is this? It's another Equilux failure. See, you go over from March 31 to April 5th. Not even a remote chance of a 12-hour offset. I hope it's becoming interesting. I hope that it's becoming understood how important this 12-hour offset of the Scriptures is. I really hope. Common Era 28 summary, covenant calendar Passover. It was on its second cycle. Number one, the lunar conjunction before the Tekufa, covenant calendar Passover, the second cycle, and the lunar Passover were about 4 to 5 cycles apart, depending on the count. Second point, lunar conjunction after the Tekufa, Passover, a fourth cycle again. The covenant calendar Passover and the lunar Passover were 23 to 24 cycles apart, depending on how one counts. Common Era 28. In considering 4 different Passover timing scenarios, it is once again impossible to reckon them with the scriptural 12-hour offset as written in John 19:42 and Matthew 26:5. I hope by the end of part 2, these 2 verses become very clear. Common Era 28 is a very popular year for the crucifixion, according to lunar calendars. Notice that getting my words mixed here. Notice that both lunar calculations show a fourth cycle Abib 14 Passover, March 31st and April 28th. Yet still, even with the 2 fourth cycle calculations, Common Era 28 cannot find alignment with the scriptural documentation. The Equilux option added nothing, but also failed miserably. Next up, Common Era 29. Same exercise. The following slides, we're going to be looking for the lunar Passover again, and ultimately we're looking for the 12-hour festal offset of the scripture. The Tekufa sign as the New Year day, we're going to jump right in here because we already have the covenant calendar set up. Tekufa on the 22nd. Your green line count, your green line Abib 14 count puts us on a third cycle of the week, or a Tuesday in common English. Third cycle of the week. Scripture says Passover was on a fourth cycle. So obviously this isn't the year of Yahusha's death in covenant calendar. Let's continue. The Tekufa sign as the new year. If the March 22 Tekufa was the New Year day, the covenant calendar Abib 14 would have been on April 4th, a second cycle. Again, what does that do for scriptural alignment in 29? No midst of the week crucifixion here, so we can't apply that. Common Era 29. Let's look at the lunar view. We already have covenant calendar understanding and the Tekufa on the 22nd as what happens in reality. The conjunction given to us here, we mark that up to here. The conjunction is right here. Let's bring in the sliver moon. Let's bring in the new moonth day. Let's count out the days from the 7th to the 20th. From new moonth day, there are 14 cycles to the 20th. The lunar Passover. On when? A first cycle of the week. Well, this cannot fulfill the scriptural crucifixion of a fourth cycle. And look, the lunar Passover would have been where? Before the Tekufa event and long before Abib 14. See, their Passover would have been before the Tekufa. How can that be? What would happen if the next crescent moon was chosen after the Tekufa? Let's try it. Remember, we've been told that we need to look at the sliver moon after the Tekufa. So let's go there. This is the second lunar view. Here we are. The conjunction is given to us on the 2nd of April, bringing in the sliver moon. New month day, again, 14 days later, it's on the 18th, 14 cycles away, and it is on a second cycle. There's a problem here. Note this blue box that came in, blue because it represents Yahusha. Blue, the color of royalty. The Passover is a problem with this one. The lunar Passover on the 18th, a second cycle, is long after the covenant calendar Pesach. It was on April 5th, the third cycle in the first week of the same Gregorian month. Blue, this represents covenant calendar. This represents truth from the scripture. And that's why we say that there was no Passover, there was no crucifixion on Common Era 29, because this was not the midst of the week. Again, no fourth cycle mark, no possibility of aligning the 12-hour festal offset as spoken by those verses. No offset, no scriptural alignment, not in 29. But what about Enoch's Equilux view? What about the 17th, the Bacchanalia observation? Paganism, shall we be paying attention here? Again, let's look at it. New Lux month day. Count your days out. Count your days. Here comes to the 31st, the 14 days. The Enoch Equilux, Abib 14, is on the 5th cycle of the week. There's lots more problems. It's way too early for Scripture's 12-hour offset with a covenant calendar, and it's most certainly not possible with the lunar calendar of the Jews either. What is it? It's a double Equilux failure. Bacchanalia does not align with the Scriptures. Here we are, Common Era 30. Same exercises, same results. Well, we're going to leave Common Era 30 for part 2 this afternoon, but we're going to continue on with years 31 to 34 first, because we need to cover our bases. So next up, Common Era 31, same exercise. Will these years from 31 to 34 reveal alignment? What about that 12-hour festal offset? The Tekufa sign, again, as New Year's Day. Here it's recorded as 23rd, and we see the timing early in the morning. That's around the time of dawn. We add the 2 hours for Jerusalem. We get to 6:26 a.m. That's past dawn. So we're going to stick with the 23rd as the Tekufa, the 23rd on Gregorian date, March 23. There's your green lines here. This is your Abib 14 count. Count out to 14. At lands covenant calendar Passover on a 6th cycle. A 6th cycle. But let's look at this New Year Day for the Tekufa controversy again. If the New Year's Day was on the Tekufa, that would set the Passover back one day, and it would be on a 5th cycle of the week. Again, need I say again? Yeah, I'll say it again. No midst of the week crucifixion here. No alignment with the scripture. What happens to that Tekufa, or the New Year's Day being on the Tekufa? Well, it doesn't work here. And if by the time we get to view all these years and we see that the New Year's Day being the day of the Tekufa, didn't work for any of the years 23 to 34, then we will understand that New Year's Day is not the day of the Tekufa, for it will then be eliminated. That is why we are going through these exercises. I hope you're documenting this. Common Era 31, we're going to look at the first lunar view. There's our conjunction. We have the conjunction here. We have the sliver moon. This is the Tekufa here. From the sliver moon, new moonth day, count out 14 days, gold box to gold box. From new moonth day, there are 14 cycles to the 28th, the lunar Passover on a fourth cycle that starts at sunset of the third cycle, the evening before. Remember, sunset to sunset, starts at sunset. Interesting. How does this work out? See how close the lunar Passover was to the Tekufa? Very, very close. Only 5 cycles away. Covenant Calendar Passover was still 9 more cycles in the future. There is certainly no possibility of the 12-hour festal offset as documented by John 19:42 and Matthew 26:5 in Common Era 31. You're going to be hearing this a lot because that festal or that 12-hour festal offset is so incredibly accurate, as you're going to see this afternoon. And it's not here, not in Common Era 31. So what's next? Well, this is a second lunar view, and this is after the equinox. Let's look at it. Here is your conjunction. Down here, bring it up to the 10th. There's your sliver moon. There's your new moonth day. New moonth day down to here, gold box to gold box, 14 days. That's on the 26th. And that starts at sunset of the fourth cycle, the evening before. Recall, Covenant Calendar Pesach was on a 6th cycle, and it was a long ways away. No 12-hour offset here. Sorry to disappoint you. Using the lunar Passover after the Tekufa moves the lunar Passover almost 3 weeks later. Is that variableness? In Yahuwah, there is no variableness. What about this lunar calendar? There is absolutely no possibility of the 12-hour festal offset as documented in these verses. I'm sure you've heard me say that before, but you're going to hear it again. What's next? Oh, again, the Bacchanalia observation. Equilux over here. Equilux. Where does that bring us? There's your new moonth day. Count out to the gold box. Enoch Equilux Abib 14 is on the 7th cycle of the week. Again, way too early for the 12-hour offset with a covenant calendar. And it's certainly not possible with the lunar calendar of the Jews either. Another double Equilux failure. Need I say more about paganism? What about Common Era 32? We need to examine it. So again, as you see, right away, we have the covenant calendar, Tekufa up here. Not just covenant calendar, this is the reality in the sky. Why? Because Yahuwah did it. Why covenant calendar? Because Yahuwah did it. It's all to do with Yahuwah. He orchestrated the whole thing. That's why it comes together. It's like a beautiful picture. But let's count it out. From this down to here is 14 days. Passover was on a 7th day Sabbath in this year, exactly the same as when Joshua was entering into Canaan, exact same pattern. But what about that New Year's Day? Is it on the day of the Tekufa? So what happens, of course, as you'll note, it brings us back one day. If the New Year's Day was on the Tekufa, that would place the Passover on a preparation. Well, no chance of the midst of the week crucifixion here. No chance of it. Wouldn't happen. Eliminates that. So we're going to look again at the lunar view 1 and 2. First note, the February 29th conjunction and the count to March 16th, Abib 14. So we look over here. The February 29th, the conjunction is here. It's what we're shown here. And we're going to bring in the new month day up here. Please note that if the sliver was on March 2 from the February 29th conjunction and the only sliver before the Tekufa, the lunar Abib 14 would be on March 16, 5 cycles before the Tekufa, this 16th. That would be their Passover 5 cycles before the Tekufa. So this would be a Passover, 2 Passovers in that year, because the year does not change until the Tekufa, according to Yahuwah. 2 Passovers in 1 year? Sorry, this is not viable. So this would be their new month day. And this would make this, again, the Passover on the 16th. This is the lunar view for number 2. So here is the conjunction on the second view, on the second lunar type of calendar. And this is the sliver moon here. Here is your new month day. Count gold box to gold box. 14 days. From new month day, there are 14 cycles to the lunar Abib 14. The what? The second cycle. Again, no fourth cycle of the week crucifixion here. And there is not 12 hours from here to here. This is covenant calendar Pesach. Where do you get a 12-hour offset this far apart? Didn't happen. Sorry. There is certainly no possibility of fulfilling the 12-hour offset mentioned in those scriptures. Passover for covenant calendar was 9 cycles earlier. So let's continue on. Here is chart number 3 of a lunar view. Chart number 3. This is a little bit out of the exception. Now I want you to notice up here. Notice these 2 asterisks. Very interesting stuff. It says here that the new moon conjunction was on the 29th. So we're going to go with this. This is just a little bit different than before, but we have to cover our bases. Note I have here, conjunction as per naval chart. Note the double asterisks. There's a reason for that. So if this is the conjunction, we're going to bring in the new moon on the 30th, yet this chart says it's the dark moon, but we'll go with what the chart says. Sliver moon, as per chart, if you'll notice up here, first evening of the visible crescent, it says March 31. So we're going to mark out the sliver moon on the 31st. Count out your 14 days. Here we have the lunar, the third view of the lunar system on the 14th. There, Abib 14 on the 14th of April on a second cycle of the week. From new month day, there are 14 cycles to the lunar Abib 14, the second cycle. But where is covenant calendar Pesach? It's way over here. Again, a huge failure of the lunar calendar to find a 12-hour festal offset. It's not even close, not even remotely. So again, we have to look at this and have discernment. What are we going to accept? What about the fourth view? We're going to be spotting on the second evening. Got to cover our bases. Again, the conjunction as per naval chart. And this is with the double asterisks. Again, they say that this is the time of the new moon, or no, the time of the, I got this mixed up. The time of the conjunction right here, and this is the second evening of the sliver spotting. There's so much going on. It's, get all this straight. If this is a sliver moon, as they declare, this is new moon's day over here. Again, gold box to gold box, 14 cycles, and it is on a third cycle of the week. Yet, no fourth cycle in Common Era 32, and a long distance from covenant calendar Pesach. No 12-hour offset. So that eliminates Common Era 32. When the second evening sliver option is considered, the lunar Abib 14 lands upon a third cycle. That is 10 cycles following the covenant calendar Passover. Sorry, no midst of the week crucifixion, no scriptural 12-hour offset here. And that's going to sound like a recording pretty soon. No 12-hour offset here. But wait to part 2. I think it might surprise you. Enoch's Jerusalem Equilux view. Again, here's the Equilux. Here's the New Lux month day. Count out 14 days, gold box to gold box. Enoch Equilux, Abib 14, is on the second cycle of the week. Way too early for a 12-hour offset, and it will not align with the Jews' festival either for a 12-hour offset. Again, a double Equilux failure. I don't think that last sentence is going to surprise you by the time we get to Common Era 30 in the second portion. Another double Equilux failure. Next up, Common Era 33, same exercise. Yeah, please don't get weary yet. We're almost done. Another 2 more years to go. Hang in there. We'll get her done. Tekufa sign as the New Year day. Again, we have the covenant calendar all laid out here. Tekufa sign, 14 days, count them out. A Abib 14 on a first cycle of the week. That's not a midst of the week. Well, we're going to continue here. What about that Tekufa being the day of the new year? Remember, we have to look at this. It's an option. If the New Year's Day was on the Tekufa, that would set back Passover 1 day, which would put us on the 7th-day Sabbath. Well, that doesn't do anything for us. That doesn't do anything for scriptural alignment. No midst of the week in Common Era 33 if the New Year's Day was on the Tekufa. Once this is tallied up, you will see that New Year's Day is not on the day of the Tekufa. It is the day after the Tekufa. Anyhow, let's continue. Common Era 33, we're going to look at the lunar view. Remember, covenant calendar Pesach's way over here. But here we have our conjunction. There's our black dot. This is the conjunction. Let's bring in the sliver moon over here, sliver moon. What about new moonth day? Interesting. New moonth day was on the day of the Tekufa. So we count out 14 days, gold box to gold box, 14 lunar days. From the new moonth day, there are 14 cycles to the lunar Abib 14th, and it is where? A 7th cycle of the week. Yet, Pesach is way over here. This is before the covenant calendar Pesach. Yet, the scripture says that the lunar Pesach followed the covenant calendar Pesach. This one is before. Is that scriptural alignment? Or is this non-alignment? We must accrue those verses with the scripture. They must agree. Otherwise, we have a problem. So what do we do with this view of Common Era 33? Do we have a round file, anybody? Yes, we have a round file, and it will be tossed out because it does not align with scripture. The lunar dating will not support a fourth cycle festal connection. Daniel 9:27 said, midst of the week, and prophecy could not be fulfilled here. Neither could Matthew 27 or John 19. Sorry, no alignment in Common Era 30 with this lunar view. So let's look at the next. How about the Equilux view? Again, are we going to get tired of this Equilux view? I hope so. Here's your Lux month day, silver or gold box to gold box. Yeah, here's your third cycle Passover according to this calculation. Again, far too early, no 12-hour offset. It does not line up with the Jews' Passover, the lunar system. What is it? Do I need to read this again? Yes, I will. Another double Equilux failure. Bacchanalia does not align with the scripture. Where do we give our allegiance? So we're coming up to the final one this year. We're just about done. Final one, I should say, in Common Era 34. Same exercise. So let's look at it. Again, the Tekufa laid out according to covenant calendar. Here we are, Tekufa. Your green lines brings us over to covenant calendar Passover on a first cycle of the week. Again, no midst of the week crucifixion here. What does that do for Common Era 34? No midst of the week crucifixion according to covenant calendar? Well, it eliminates it for being the year of the crucifixion. But we're going to continue. What if the New Year's Day was on the day of the Tekufa? Remember, we're looking at that. It would set the Passover according to that figuring on the first cycle of the week. So from Common Era 26 to 29 and 31 to 34, we have not seen the Tekufa as being the New Year Day. Please remember that when we go to the study this afternoon. Will the New Year Day be the day of the Tekufa, or will it not? So that eliminates here Common Era 30 from being alignment. What about the lunar view, the first lunar view of Common Era 34? Again, here is your conjunction. We put that up here so we know where we're going. Your sliver moon over here, spotting of the sliver moon. Next day is new moon's day. Count out your 14 lunar days from gold box to gold box. Lunar Abib 14 is on a fifth cycle of the week. It would start on the fourth cycle at sunset, indeed. Yet it is way too early to be even close to the covenant calendar Pesach over here. Way too early. No possibility of a 12-hour offset. Well, shall we ignore what's written in the scriptures and just go with it? Or does the scriptures clearly define what year that 12-hour offset is in? What about the second lunar view, which is the sliver after the equinox? Let's look at it. The sliver after the equinox. It's on the 7th of April. It's over here. Here's your conjunction. There's your sliver moon. There's your new moon's day. Again, gold box to gold box, 14 days. It would start on a fifth cycle at sunset. And what cycle of the week is it? Not good. Not good at all. This does not give us a midst of the week crucifixion. Problem is, it's way too late to align with a 12-hour offset because the Passover, the Passover for covenant calendar was way over here. This is way too late. That removes the second lunar view after the equinox in Common Era 34 as being scriptural. Sorry, this one goes the way of the round file. Should we look at the Equilux? Yeah, we have to look at the Equilux. We have to cover our bases because that is what is set forth for our people. Yahuwah says, my people die for a lack of knowledge. So let's lay it before our eyes. Equilux, Bacchanalia, New Lux month is right here on the 18th. Count out your gold box to gold box. 14 days, again. It's way, way too early to find a 12-hour Passover offset and no possibility of a 12-hour offset with a lunar calendar. It's not even close to Passover of the covenant calendar. Again, once again, I have to say it, a double Equilux failure. I hope this is setting in. Let's do a word summary for part one, wrapping up here. Covenant calendar summary. Covenant calendar marks Passover 14 from the day following the Tekufa of 6 times on March 22, 2 times on March 23, placing Passover on either April 4 or the 5th each year. Does this not sound like an appointed time for the Moedim? The only variableness here are the Gregorian numbers. That's the variableness, not Yahusha. It's his program. He said he does not appreciate variableness, nor does he participate. I believe that's found in Malachi. He is not variable. Not one Passover in the 8 calendar years falls on Wednesday, midst of the week. Therefore, not one of these years qualifies for Yahusha's final Passover. Can we stop for a moment of silence and let that sink in? Common Era 26 to 29 and 31 to 34. There is no midst of the week crucifixion in accordance with the statutes and in accordance with the documentation of the New Testament, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Let that sink in for a moment, please. Second word summary. The lunar Passover calculation before and after the Tekufa. Before the Tekufa, there is a great spread of new moon day dates from March 7 to March 22nd. Variableness is what I understand when I read that. March 7 to March 22nd. Passovers range from March 20 to April the 5th. Is that variableness? With whom there is no variableness comes to mind. What about that lunar calendar? Common Era 31 is 1 year that has a Wednesday or a 4th cycle midst of the week Passover. And interestingly enough, most feast camps teaching a Friday cross use Common Era 31 as the year of Yahusha's Passover, when indeed there is no way to find a lunar Friday Passover in Common Era 31. How about after the Tekufa? There is another great spread of new moon day dates from March 23 to where? April 13, with Passovers ranging from April 11th to April 28th. Variableness. That's not in Yahuwah's kingdom. So what do we do with that lunar calendar? Interestingly enough, there is one Wednesday Passover in Common Era 28 and a very popular year. Third word summary for part one, Equilux Passover calculations. Equilux is always on March 17 and Passover is always on March 31st, always. Years Common Era 28 and 34 both had a Wednesday for the Passover. While the Equilux calculation has the attributes of the same yearly appointed times for the Moedim, none of the calculations can satisfy the 12-hour offset found in the gospel account. I'm going to read this one more time because this is a great amount of the Enoch calendar calculations. While the Equilux calculation has the attributes of the same yearly appointed times for the Moedim, none of the calculations can satisfy the 12-hour offset found in the gospel account. Here is a table summary for part 1. I'm not going to go through them because you have seen it all. But when you look at this and your own time, you can understand it, go through it carefully. Here's your Tekufa dates. See, March 22, March 22. It's this chart, or these charts will set it up all together. You can look at them, you can go through them and compare them. There's the Equilux calculations over here. This is, they're all on a Wednesday, there's no doubt. Yet they're very different from each other. They do not align with the covenant calendar. Out of every calculation, not 1 year could produce the 12-hour offset. This is a documentation of everything that we have looked at. This is the foundation of covenant calendar that exposes the traditions that we have been taught. This is the documentation of the reasoning behind it. Covenant calendar spots traditions immediately and eliminates them. That is the beauty of the covenant calendar. This is the end of part 1. And we will be continuing this in part 2. And there's going to be a very careful and detailed examination given to Common Era 30. Detailed, yes. And I hope you can stick with me through this, because what you're going to see is the absolute basis of the covenant calendar, the very basis of the calendar of Noah, of Abraham, of Moshe, and most importantly, of Yahusha, the one that died, the one that was crucified, the one that was killed, the one that volunteered his life to be taken on that tree just for you and I. And what did he do on the morning after the resurrection? He observed the feast. He was the first fruit, the basis of our salvation. So I want to say thank you for everyone that has joined us today. Yahuwah marks the sands of time. If you have any questions or comments, they can be sent to me, Timothy Asselford. So there's the address below. You can send your questions to questions@studythecalendar.com. And if you want to look us up on the website, www.studythecalendar.com, where all our studies are free to download. Shalom, everyone. Thank you.